Previously on The Chosen People.
I have seen the affliction of my people in Egypt. I have heard their cries and beheld their suffering. I have come to deliver them out of slavery and carry them to a land of promise, a vast and vibrant land teeming with life, a land flowing with milk and honey.
So, you will still send me? Jethro, I have to return to Egypt.
What? Why would you return there? What's left for you in Egypt?
I'm burdened by the people I left there. I want to see if my brothers are still alive. I have lived comfortably here under your leadership. It doesn't sit right with me that they're suffering.
Good luck convincing my daughter to uproot her life and take her children into almost certain peril. Good luck, my friend. Do not envy you.
Return to Egypt to do what, exactly?
To set his people free. To lead them into the land he's promised to them.
Why you?
I asked the same question. I think this has always been my destiny. This must be why I was spared all those years ago. This is why I survived the Nile, and Pharaoh's daughter plucked me out of the river. I was chosen for this.
I am yours, Moses. I and your children are yours. When do we leave?
In the desert silence, the blood of a son became the lifeline for a leader. Shalom, my friends, from here in the Holy Land. Welcome to The Chosen People. I'm Yael Eckstein with the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews. Each day we'll hear a dramatic story inspired by the Bible. Stories filled with timeless lessons of faith, love, and the meaning of life. Through Israel's story, we find this truth, that we are all chosen for something great. If you haven't yet followed the podcast, be sure to do so now. That way you never have to miss an episode. And that small step helps us tremendously as we try to be discovered by more people so that we can inspire them. If you're interested in finding out more about the prophetic, life-saving work of the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews, you can visit our website at ifcj.org. When was the last time that you heard a story about God trying to end the life of someone he had called to lead? Moses, on a mission from God to free the chosen people, suddenly finds himself in a deadly confrontation with the divine. Why would God, who appointed Moses, now seek to end his life? And what part does Moses' bride play in this life or death moment? Let's unravel this ancient, enigmatic encounter.
This episode of The Chosen People with Yael Eckstein contains explicit content that may be triggering for some listeners and inappropriate for young children. Listener discretion is advised. The sun had dipped low beyond the horizon, dragging its fiery orange cloak beneath the sands. Moses and Zipporah, weary and worn from the ceaseless journey through the blistering dunes and the bone-chilling nights, found a moment of solitude. Zipporah, Gershom, and Eliezer rested a short distance away beneath the shade of a crooked acacia tree. They were exhausted from traveling. Even worse, they were uncertain as to why they were traveling. Everything seemed veiled in mystery. They didn't see what Moses saw, nor could they hear what Moses could hear. The wind whispered across the barren land, carrying with it the dust of ages and the distant howl of a desert wolf. Alone in the vastness, Moses felt the presence of the Lord descend upon him like a shadow.
When you return to Egypt, see that you show Pharaoh every wonder I have bestowed upon you. Stretch forth your hand, and the waters will turn to blood. Cast down your staff, and it will writhe like the serpent in the sand. Yet steel your heart, Moses, for Pharaoh's heart I have turned to iron. He will not let my people go.
Moses turned back to his wife and 2 children. He wondered about their place in the Lord's plans.
What of my wife and my sons? What are their fates?
Tell Pharaoh that Israel is my firstborn son. If he will not release my son to me, then I shall take his. His firstborn will be as dust upon the wind, as a shadow upon the wall.
A chill crept up Moses' spine despite the heat of the day that still clung to the sands. He had seen the blood of the innocent soak the mud-bricked streets of Egypt. The crimes of Pharaoh's house were etched into his soul. The boys were fast asleep under the tree. Zipporah placed woolen blankets over them and approached her husband from behind.
Is he speaking to you again?
Moses turned to his wife and then glanced up at the skies. The auburn glow of dusk dimmed into the dark expanse. The stars hadn't yet emerged. Moses turned his gaze back at Zipporah and gestured for her to come over.
He was, but not anymore.
What was he saying?
He was reminding me of his plans for Ramses, for Pharaoh.
Will Ramses listen to you? From what you've told me, he did not respect you as a brother.
No, he did not. But there were moments when we were just children, playing on the banks of the river, pretending to be monsters and warriors, but much has changed since then.
There was a lingering silence between them. Moses could feel his wife's shoulders tense and soften with each new thought. Her mind was racing, as was his.
What's troubling you?
Everything, Moses. Why leave Midian? Why return to the place that brought you so much pain?
I didn't choose this, Zipporah. I have little choice in the matter. If it were up to me, I'd remain in the pasture until my bones could rest in the plains. I want nothing more than to quietly watch our sons grow and hold your hand. But the God of my forefathers has chosen me.
He's asked you to leave your home and enter into certain danger. What else will he require of you?
I'm not sure. He's still a mystery to me.
I know little about this God, Moses. I will admit I'm a bit frightened by him.
I think that's wise, my love. I hope Pharaoh shares your fear when we arrive in Egypt.
Are you nervous to return? You left as an Egyptian, but you will return as a Hebrew.
I am nervous, but a part of me is relieved. For so long, I've only been a Hebrew by blood. But after this, there'll be no denying who I am. I am an Israelite, descended from Abraham, and called by the Lord.
Night settled, and the stars sprinkled across the skies like speckles of paint. A strange and heavy silence settled over their camp. The air itself seemed to grow thick with a foreboding weight, like a storm gathering its fury, though the sky above remained clear. The breath of the desert turned warm, and the sand beneath Moses' feet seemed to burn with a hidden fire. His eyes darted awake. He rolled out and crawled to a nearby stone. His body felt as if it were about to burst into flames. Then it came. The presence. An unseen force, like a hand clenched tight around his heart. Moses staggered, his breath hitching as if the air had been stolen from his lungs. The Lord was upon him, not as a shepherd calling his flock, but as a beast with fangs bared. God himself had drawn a sword against him. But why? Had the Lord led Moses out into the wilderness just to kill him? Was this retribution for something? Moses fell to his knees, eyes wide, his hand clawing at his chest. A great terror seized him. He turned to his wife, Zipporah, and their sons, huddled close beneath the tree's meager protection. They were fast asleep, unaffected by whatever plagued him.
Zipporah,
Moses collapsed onto the floor. The thud awoke his wife. She came to his side and observed his face in the faint glow of the starlit sky. Zipporah, sharp-eyed and keen as a hawk in the night, sensed the dread that had befallen her husband. She had seen it before, in the eyes of those marked for death by the gods of Midian.
Your God has done this. But why?
She stripped Moses' clothes off to expose him to the chilled air. She had to get his fever down before it overcame him completely. As she removed the last of his undergarments, she realized something. His naked body gave away a clue to what may have been happening. She thought about the night of their wedding. The first time she and Moses had shared a bed, Zipporah noticed that Moses was marked. He called it the circumcision. Moses told her it was a symbol of God's covenant with the Hebrews. It was a seal of the relationship between the Israelite people and the God that had called them. She turned back to her sons. They had circumcised Gershom, but not Eleazar. Moses didn't find it important anymore, being so removed from his past. Perhaps this God was demanding more of Moses, more of his family. Zipporah realized what she had to do. As her father's successor as priestess of Midian, she knew a thing or two about rituals and the importance of following through. This was the only way to save her husband. She looked down at his trembling body and sneered.
I hate you for this, Moses.
She didn't mean the words she spoke, but the thought of cutting her son brought her agony. She wasted no time. Grabbing a flint with trembling hands, she rushed to her son. The blade gleamed in the pale moonlight.
This is barbaric. I'm sorry, my sweet boy.
She woke Gershom and held a finger against her mouth. The moonlight revealed an uncharacteristic intensity in Zipporah's eyes.
What is it, Mother?
I need you to be quiet and do as I say. Hold down your brother for me. No matter how much he screams or flails, do not let go until I say otherwise. Do you understand?
What are you going to do?
Do as I say, Gershom! Now!
Gershom crawled over to his baby brother. He was fast asleep under the blankets. His sweet, steady breaths rose in the chilled night. Gershom's brow curled upward in grief. He looked to his mother, then pressed his hands against Eleazar's arms. Zipporah raised the boy's tunic and brought the sharp stone to his foreskin. With tears in her eyes, she pressed the blade against her son's flesh. The child's eyes darted open in panic. He screamed and thrashed. Gershom pressed down on his arms and legs, holding him still for his mother. Blood flowed, hot and red, staining the sands. Zipporah lifted the blade, not sure if she had the stomach to continue. But as she stopped, Moses' convulsing increased. That was confirmation. This is what had to be done. Zipporah steeled herself and continued with the flint. Her hands worked feverishly, each cut deliberate and filled with a desperate, primal urgency. She muttered words under her breath, half prayer, half curse, her dark hair whipping across her face in the night wind. Eleazar's screams of pain turned to frantic pleas for help.
Mother, we have to stop. Why are we doing this?
If I do not do this, your father will die.
Finally, the foreskin was off of her child. Gershom rushed to press a cloth against his brother. He held him in his arms as he whimpered. Zipporah's hands were shaking with grief and rage. Then, almost instantly, The warm wind ceased its howl, and the night was still again. Zipporah looked over to her husband, who was still lying in the sand. He stirred awake and propped himself up. The weight that had pinned Moses to the earth lifted, and he gasped, his lungs filling with the cool night air once more.
What? What happened?
With the foreskin of her son clutched in her hand, she turned back to Moses. Her eyes blazed like coals as she flung the bloodied flesh at his feet.
Here's the blood your God required.
Her voice was low and filled with a venom that could curdle the blood. Her words hung in the air like a sword poised to strike. Moses looked up at Zipporah, his eyes wide with a mixture of relief and dread, for he knew what had been done. The blood had spoken. The covenant had been sealed anew, and their sons were now claimed by the God of Israel, bound by blood as Moses himself was bound.
How did you know?
I haven't heard the voice of the Lord as you have, but tonight he seemed to communicate exactly what he wanted.
Thank you.
Do not thank me. Don't you dare thank me! I had to make my son bleed! This barbaric act has sullied our bond, Moses! Your God made me cut my son! You are a bridegroom of blood to me!
I'm sorry, Zipporah, but this had to be done. The Lord will not accept partial obedience. He requires everything.
Moses paused, realizing what had to be done next. The Lord required everything from Moses. He was about to ask the entire nation of Israel to uproot themselves, give up their lives, and follow him into the unknown. If he was going to require this sacrifice from the people, Moses had to follow suit.
He requires everything. I must give up everything. Return with our sons to Midian. I must continue this journey alone.
After all this, you're sending us away?
Zipporah beat her fists against Moses' bare chest. The blood from their son stained her hands and his chest.
We were supposed to do everything together.
Zipporah, what I have to do will require everything from me. I will have to give more than our son's foreskin. My life is no longer my own.
As you wish.
Zipporah staggered backward and began to weep. She fell into the sand. Moses stepped forward to comfort her, but she slapped his hand away. She stood and turned from him, her face a mask of fury and defiance. She left him there, alone in the silence. She wrapped her weeping son in her arms and led the boys back to Midian. The early signs of dawn lit their way. Moses stood silently, still naked, watching them leave. The taste of death still clung to the back of his throat. The desert chill closed in around him, and he understood that the path before him, the path to free his people, would be soaked in blood, his own, and perhaps that of many others.
Wow, what a bewildering story. Here we find God poised to strike down his chosen leader, Moses, right in the middle of his God-given mission. It's baffling. It's unsettling. How do we make sense of such a bizarre and confusing passage? One that challenges our understanding of divine justice, covenant, and God's mysterious ways. Reading Exodus 4:24-26 is like eavesdropping on one side of a phone call. Here's what we can piece together. On their journey from Midian to Egypt, God confronts Moses and his wife. Moses becomes incapacitated. Maybe it was a seizure, maybe an illness. But his wife, Zipporah, understands immediately. And Zipporah's actions appeased God's anger. The attack was never meant to be fatal. It was a divine warning. Moses, the chosen leader of the chosen people, had neglected the covenantal sign given to Abraham. But we see Zipporah perform the ritual, and God accepted it. Not for the ritual's perfection, but for the faith and humility that it represented. Faith renders an ordinance effectual. It's not about magic words or practice. It's about faith and obedience. Zipporah acted without the full picture, but she acted in obedience to what she knew. May we all act with such faith, even when we don't fully understand. Now, I have to admit, today's passage is one of the most difficult in the whole Bible. And even after millennia of studying it, we don't fully understand it. Why was it so important that Moses circumcise his son on the 8th day after his birth, as God had commanded Abraham and all future generations of the chosen people? After all, wasn't Moses on a mission for God to free the chosen people from slavery? Wouldn't it have been okay to delay the circumcision for just a little while? To try to understand this, it's important to remember what the commandment of circumcision was all about. It was, and it still is, a powerful symbol of God's covenant with the chosen people. The act of circumcision seals that promise that God will bless those who bless the Jewish people. The blood of circumcision declares that even when the blood of the chosen people is shed by those who wish to destroy them, they will still remain an eternal people. Moses, in the heat of the moment, in his haste to return to Egypt to free the slaves, temporarily forgot the importance of this covenant. And so, God was forced to remind Moses that even a divine mission didn't allow him to forget what he owed to the next generation of the chosen people. This lesson has stayed with the Jewish people throughout the ages, performing the circumcision ritual even in secret, as the Jewish people were being oppressed and killed for their faith. They continued to do this circumcision ritual because that's what it means to have faith in God. There have been so many enemies who tried to get the Jewish people specifically to stop performing the circumcision ritual, but the Jewish people never stopped. And it seems kind of funny. Why is this so important? Even Moses needs to be reminded of how important it is. And the reason why is because it is a covenant. It is a covenant between God and his people. And that's why the Jewish people to this day take this lesson very seriously. A covenant with God is the most precious thing in the world, even if we can't fully understand it. Martin Buber, a profound Jewish philosopher, once wrote, quote, "All life actually is an encounter." In these few words, he captures a truth deeply woven into our tradition. God's encounter with Moses is raw, unsettling, and yet it's an encounter that transforms. In Exodus 4:24-6, we see Zipporah's decisive action and receive a radical message. The covenant with God requires something deeply personal, even painful. God's holiness demands recognition. And this divine encounter shows us that being set apart by God involves more than a calling. It requires a heart aligned with God's covenant. Now, imagine a moment in your life when everything seems to be falling apart. You're on the brink of a new venture, and suddenly you're faced with an unexpected crisis. It feels like God is against you, not for you. Perhaps it's a job loss, a broken relationship, or a health scare. In these moments, it's easy to forget God's faithfulness. Moses' encounter with God teaches us that sometimes God intervenes and it feels like an interruption. But when life disrupts, it's often God's way of bringing us back to our core commitments, to remind us of who we are in Him. How do we respond to these divine disruptions? Like Zipporah, we must act with faith and decisiveness. We need to hold on to the covenant even when it's painful. Remember that God's interruptions are invitations. They call us back to his covenant, to faithfulness, to holiness. In every trial, in every unexpected turn, God is there. May we embrace these divine encounters, allowing them to reshape us into people who bear his covenant in our hearts and lives. And in doing so, may we find strength, hope, and the courage to walk the path that he has set before us. Amen.
You can listen to The Chosen People with Yael Eckstein ad-free by downloading and subscribing to the pray.com app today. This pray.com production is only made possible by our dedicated team of creative talents. Steve Katina, Max Bard, Zach Schellebarger, and Ben Gammon are the executive producers of The Chosen People with Yael Eckstein, edited by Alberto Avila, narrated by Paul Coltofianu. Characters are voiced by Jonathan Cotton, Aaron Salvato, Sarah Seltz, Mike Reagan, Stephen Ringwald, Sylvia Zaradok, and the opening prayer is voiced by John Moore. Music by Andrew Morgan Smith, written by Bree Roseley and Aaron Salvato. Special thanks to Bishop Paul Lanier, Robin Van Etten, Caleb Burrows, Jocelyn Fuller, and the team at International Fellowship of Christians and Jews. You can hear more Pray.com productions on the Pray.com app, available on the Apple App Store and Google Play Store. If you enjoyed The Chosen People with Yael Eckstein, please rate and leave a review.